As a medical doctor, I went to Washington, of course, reluctantly. But of course, once a doctor, always a doctor. I started making diagnosis while I was in Washington. And my diagnosis, first and foremost, became the ignorance that we had of our understanding of Africa, not only as Africans, not as Black people around the world, but even members of Congress themselves, the US government, they really don't understand Africa. So I set out.
So I came across this video by Dr. Arikana Chihombori. She has been a fantastic Pan-Africanist. She has been one of those people who have been pushing for the unification of Africa. And she has done an excellent job in doing that. So let's watch this video together and hear what she has to say. Whenever I saw a video of her, I am so interested because I do believe that she is somebody who has a lot to say and who knows a lot about the problems that Africa is facing. So let's watch together. And just to let you know, from time to time, I will pause the video to give you my take on what she is saying. And you can also do the same in the comment section. Let us know what you think. So let's watch.
To address the issue of the ignorance about what was going on in Africa, educating the African diaspora primarily, and secondarily, those in the US government and anybody else that wished to listen to the message. Because I felt that that was the root cause of what was going on in Africa, the lack of understanding and appreciation of what was really going on in Africa, and more importantly, identifying the root causes. And for Africa, I came to the conclusion that France was the biggest risk to peace and security and overall African development, particularly in West Africa, because of one particular agreement that they would make the African heads of state sign when they were receiving their independence. It was a horrible, continues to be a horrible document that sadly, it has been allowed to continue to this very day, to the serious detriment of the Africans.
Yeah, about the France issue, I think she did an excellent job. Like, I never knew about this document. They call it the Franc-Afrique, something like that. I never knew about it. But when I heard her talking about this document, I had to go on my own and did some research. Then I came to realize that, yeah, she is right. You know, she is right. There's a lot of things about Africa that most of us do not know. Like even also the idea that the former French colonies in West Africa and Central Africa need to deposit their reserve with the French Ministry of Finance. And I'm like, why do they have to do that? Why? There is no reason for doing that. And the thing is like, most of us did not even know about this until she starts talking about it. So she has been a really, really great person in terms of educating Africans. She has really done a very fantastic job on that front.
So I set out to educate the Africans about France. Others would say, why didn't you talk about the British and all other colonizers? Yes, we would speak about them as well. But the one that is leading the pack, the one that is taking the crown of the abuse and exploitation, it is France. And I felt very strongly that if France can come to the table and also renegotiate those contracts, if France can leave Africa, that would be the beginning of true liberation. And I'm talking economic liberation of the African continent. So France is leading the pack because of its deep roots within Africa, because of the agreements that the heads of states were made to sign during independence of Africa.
Yeah, by that document, I know you were referring to the Pact on the Continued Colonization. I think you've made reference to it in quite a number of your speeches. The continued colonization of African states. Is that it?
That's correct, yes. That continues to be in place today. And through that document, African countries, the former French colonies, upwards, it used to be 85% of their bank reserves had to be deposited with the French treasury. It's now down to around 50 to 60%. To this day, poor countries are sending their bank reserves to France. To this day, poor countries, the first right of refusal of all contracts public, private, large, small, French companies a first right of refusal. To this day, all minerals discovered yet to be discovered, France has the first right of refusal. To this day, those former French colonies, all their military must be trained by France. All their military equipment must be purchased from France. And France has a presence in their countries and can invade those countries without notice should they feel their French interests are being violated. So at every level, the document is horrible and it remains in place today. I was horrified when I began to see the extent to which people simply did not know. So I made that my mission number one. Because as a medical doctor, if you're dealing with let's say, an accident situation, you first assess the heart. Does the patient have a heartbeat? Is the patient breathing? You don't worry about the broken bone. You don't worry about other peripheral damages. You start with the core. If the patient is breathing, if the patient has a heartbeat, you must revive them, get a heartbeat, get the lungs, get them breathing, and then you can deal with the other peripheral issues. So I felt the heartbeat of what was ailing Africa started with.
Yeah, I think she is quite right. She's quite right because France is the only colonial master who has managed to still keep their so-called independent states under their control. They are good in manipulation. They know how to play the people. They know how to pit them against each other. So France is like number one when it comes to this issue. France is super, super good at stuff like this. So they have done that in Africa. And until we, the Africans, start telling them that things have to change, that things cannot continue to be like before. It can never be like business as usual until we Africans start putting our feet on the ground and saying that, no, this has got to stop. Nothing will ever change until our bully is being stopped with force, not just by talking, not just by empty words. That bully never stop from bullying other people. You don't talk softly to a bully to let them stop their bullying. They won't stop. You need to use force. You need to show force. And this is exactly what Guinea has done, Mali has done, Burkina Faso, and now Niger. They have all realized that this thing with France has got to stop with our generation. So let's continue.
For their roots are not as entrenched into Africa as the French roots to this day.
Well, there are a number of Africans who have also delved very deep into this. I mean, I mentioned Kwame Nkrumah, right from the days of independence of many African countries. He also worked very hard for the independence of Ghana. We also have literary giants who have also delved into this. One of them is a Nigerian, Chinua Achebe, who has, delved very deep into, talking about the colonization and, the neo-colonization of African minds and even our literature and how all of this seeps very deep. I mean, Things Fall Apart continues to be, quite a literary work that everyone refers to. But some people say, we talk about root causes and immediate causes. What share, if you were to distribute, say, causes, I don't want to say blames, but if you were to, maybe I should use that word blame. If you were to distribute blame along root causes and immediate causes of where Africa currently is unable to fully achieve her potential, how will you distribute the blame?
I'm going to start with, of course, the mind, which is where, at the end of the day, that is where the problem really is. The legacy of colonization remains to be a serious issue for the African. It is the legacy of colonization that makes it difficult for us as a people to push back. Let me give a very simplistic example, and I use simplistic examples because I want people to really understand what's going on. Using the example of Niger, There is a mutiny in the school cafeteria. The students are sick and tired of a bully who's been taking their lunch for centuries. Finally, they've garnered enough courage. They now have enough knowledge to understand, and they're ready to stand up and push back against the bully. The question then becomes, why has it taken the students so long to stand up and push the bully back? It's because the students have been made to believe that you are inferior. The students have been threatened. The students believe that they're not as good as the bully. The headmaster, some have been smart enough and have tried to push back. Guess what? They were assassinated. But finally, the students now have enough knowledge. Question is, why has it taken this long for the students to have enough courage? But be it as it may, the legacy of slavery, the legacy of colonization left the African feeling inferior, feeling they're incapable, admiring everything else that somebody else is doing, that everything African is undesirable, that we're always looking to what those who don't look like us are doing, and we want to emulate what they are doing. Mm-hmm. That, to me, the biggest risk to Africa's development is the mind. When we can... Yes, go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted, to focus on that particular question. If you were to distribute, and I'm not going to, take away from the fact that you said, the mind is where we need to start from. But if you were to distribute it in terms of, apportioning blames.
I'm not a professional journalist, right? But I do believe that when you have a guest on your show, it's not a good idea to be interrupting them, right? Because I watch a lot of talk shows and interviews and stuff. And there was this British reporter or journalist, Piers Morgan. And I don't know if you guys know about him. He is fond of stuff like this. When he has a guest on the platform who disagrees with him, he interrupts the guest like all the time. Like, he won't even let the guest talk. And I'm like, if you knew that you don't like the opinion of the guest, or you don't like what the guest was going to say, why invite them? I think that if you have a guest on your platform, you should let the guest talk. It's not a good idea to just jump in and start talking over them, right? Or just trying to interrupt them when they are talking. Because at the end of the day, people watch your shows or your interviews, not because of you, the interviewer. It's because of the guest. They want to know or hear what the guest is going to say. That's why they watch your show. So if you have a guest on your platform, just let them talk till they are done, and then you can ask them a follow-up question. It's not a good idea to just jump in and then interrupt them. I just thought that I should share this opinion with you guys. So let's continue.
To the root cause and the immediate cause, because people have also pointed at how it is that Africans themselves are conducting themselves and, do not seem to have sufficient compassion for the people as African leaders, do not have sufficient compassion for the people that they lead. How would you distribute this particular blame? Would you say 50% to root causes, 50% to immediate causes? In what proportion would you share it?
I would say the biggest problem right now is the mind. I still believe it is the mind. Secondly, the average African leader is fighting with their hands tied behind their back, and in some cases also blindfolded. I really don't want us to get lost in the mud about peripheral issues. Remember what I said. You get into an accident situation, first you assess the heartbeat. Does the patient have a pulse? Is the patient breathing? We worry about the blown up eye. We worry about the broken bone later. We must go to the root causes. If a president of a country, my daughter, let me take you. You become the president of Nigeria today. With all good intentions, you are told, do not talk about your military, because we got that under our control as France. Do not talk about your financial resources. We control your central bank. We manage your financial policies. Do not talk about your finances. We have that under our control. Do not talk about your natural resources. Those belong to us. All your contracts, we shall choose and decide who builds your country. Now, if you stay away from all that, you are not free to run your country. What do you have? You've given up your natural resources. You've given up control of your financial resources. You've given up control of your military. What kind of a leader are you? I don't care what intentions you have. I don't care how Pan-African you are. I don't care how smart you are. Your hands are tied behind your back and you're blindfolded and you're supposed to engage in a fight and win. How? So I'm saying, before we even talk about how good a leader you are, I can tell you, I was joking with a friend. I said, I'm pretty sure right now, President Bazoum is probably happy. Because what kind of country was he leading? He had no power. He had nothing to control. That's a joke of a leadership. So once we understand that, we then go back and say, okay, fine. With whatever you were given, what have you done with it? Now I'm ready to start putting blame on the leader to say, okay, you had a small budget for healthcare. What did you do? Did you at least build one hospital during that year? Now, if it's a foreign minister, a minister of health, who is now failing to do something with that budget for 1 year, that's where we start putting the blame on local levels to say, yes, as a minister of health, you were given a budget. Show us at least one health hospital you built this year. Show us what you have done. So yes, we do have our own leadership issues. Leadership within very limited spaces. And even in those countries that are not former French colonies, we still have major presence and control by the multinationals who existed during colonization. They just went low, but they're still, by and large, running African countries. They're the ones who are the major employers, and they can manipulate the politics because of their presence within the country. They can gang up against a country and decide suddenly 10 of them, 15 of them can leave the country, taking away with them hundreds and thousands of jobs. So they still have some soft ways, underhanded ways of dealing and upsetting African economies. It still goes back to the former colonizers. So as we talk about our issues in Africa, let's not look at them in isolation. Let's understand in a holistic way all the issues that are coming to play when we end up with millions of youth unemployed. Why? Understand the entire process. Millions of children going to bed on an empty stomach. Millions of children dying. Women dying while giving birth to another life. Let's understand the entire genesis of what is going on. Because the tendency is for us to be pigeonholed and follow into this rabbit hole of a tiny little issue without understanding the genesis of that issue. And that is the holistic approach that I want the new African to have, to fully have a depth of understanding of what is going on. So we know when we are fighting, is it a fight that is local, that goes to my house? Is this my village fight? Is it my provincial fight? Is it a country fight? Is it a sub-African sub-regional fight? Or is it a continental fight? At every level, there are certain tools in our toolbox that we need to pull out. But to think you can take a village issue and apply it to a continental issue, that is stupid, that is ignorant, and we want our people to be politically mature and understand what fight this is, where we call for unity at the village level, unity at the national level, unity at the party level, unity at the continental level. So your question is a very difficult one to answer. My key point is to say, at what level is this fight? If it is a village fight, I can tell you how to apportion the blame. If it is a provincial level, if it is a national level, it is a continental level. It depends at what level this fight is all about.
Welcome back. You're watching Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao, who is the president and founder of the Africa Diaspora Development Institute, is our guest tonight, and we're discussing development on the continent of Africa.
Yeah, I must say that was that has been a very heated conversation with Dr. Arikana. And like I mentioned before, right, she is very knowledgeable about this particular subject. I think she must have done her homework. She really knows a lot about what she's talking. But there's one point I just want to hit home, right? The aspect of development in Africa. I understand that, especially West and Central Africa, these are the poorest areas in Africa. And the most countries in this area are being controlled by France. So you can kind of like draw the line, right, to really figure out what might be the problems in this country. But yes, there's a lot of corruption in Africa as a whole. There's a lot of embezzlement. I am from Africa, so I think I have seen this firsthand, and I can tell you that in as much as we blame the West, in as much as we see France like the enemy of Africa, in as much as we try to push France away from Africa and we try to be an independent country, not just by words, but in actions, we, the Africans, also need to reevaluate ourselves. Our leaders need to do some soul searching. They really need to look at themselves in the mirror to see who they really are. Because they have embezzled a lot of money from the country. They have stolen a lot. They have misappropriated a lot of funds. These funds would have been used to do things that would benefit common people. So some of these leaders need to sit up. But like Doctor said, we do not need to get things mixed up, because sometimes that is the problem in Africa. Like, we get things mixed up, and the Westerners, they try their best to confuse us so that we do not stand in one. We fight each other, and by so doing, the Westerners are winning. So let's focus on one thing at a time. Yes, there is bribery. Yes, there is corruption. Yes, there is embezzlement. And there is a lot of misappropriation of public funds. All these things are there. But let's focus on one thing at a time. Let's kick out the French first. And then we can now start discussing about how to resolve these local issues like corruption, like bribery, like embezzlement. So let's continue.
Well, you haven't hidden your support for what has happened in Niger. You've considered it. You say you don't want to call it a coup. You say you want to call it a realignment. But countries that identify as democratic have condemned what has happened in Niger. They think that democracy is very important to delivering on the welfare and security of the people of Africa. Do you agree with them?
I agree. Yes, I do agree. And also I disagree. First of all, again, going back to the genesis, keep in mind that we have walked away. We were made to walk away from our own traditional values, from our own culture, from our own indigenous ancestral leadership values. We are following their guidebook. We are following their ways of leadership. What kind of leadership tells you this is democratic? What is democratic about France forcing African countries, bullying African countries into giving up their financial resources? My daughter, answer me. What is democratic about that? What is democratic about France occupying African countries without their authority? What is democratic about France taking natural resources out of Africa? 90%, 95% of Niger's lithium is powering Europe and France. What is democratic about that? So you're saying, oh, forget that democracy. Let's just concentrate on this little bitty democracy. It is stupid. It goes back to the colonized mind. It doesn't make any sense. Before we can talk about democracy in Africa, let's practice democracy from an international point of view. Africa is not going to Europe to steal from anybody. Africa is not going to Europe to invade anybody. Let's go there first. So before you can talk about that, tell me why 90% of Niger is not electrified when their electricity, their lithium, is powering Europe. Answer that. Now we can talk about democracy. Let's not be stupid. Reality is, what is happening in Niger is those students in that dining room. It's now a mutiny. They want to keep their lunch. They're saying this time is going to be different. We just want to keep our lunch. That's
How
it.
sure are we that this is actually going to deliver lunch to the people of Niger? This is not the first time we've witnessed coups in African countries. And often, Nigeria is a very good example. Every time a military junta has taken over, you will always find a very good speech.
That's the thing about Africa, the West have come to Africa and they have fooled us about the concept of democracy. And that's why I have always said on this particular show, in as much as we might want the so-called democracy in Africa, but It's not working out for us. It's not really working out for us in Africa. And it has never worked out for us in Africa, right? Because I have not seen a place where democracy fit the people. I have not seen a place where democracy shelters the people or give them jobs. They come to Africa and they bring us an idea about democracy. And they sugarcoat it. And we believe it. Then our leaders take it and then do whatever they want to do with it. Democracy is only on paper in Africa, not in action. Not in action. There is no such a thing as democracy in Africa. And by the way, who cares about democracy if the people can eat? I have never seen somebody getting up in the morning without a job, without a house, without knowing what he or she is going to eat or feed his or her family with. But thinking, how I wish we had democracy in this country. I have never seen such a person, right? People worried about themselves and their livelihood. What am I going to eat? Where am I going to sleep? What am I going to feed my family with? I wish I had a good job. I wish I could afford a good life for my children and myself. That is what people worry about. If an African leader can do this for his or her people, that leader will be celebrated, aka Paul Kagame of Rwanda. And I know whenever I bring up Paul Kagame, it stirs a lot of confusion. Some people like, some people hate. But what I'm saying is, Paul Kagame has his own issues. Like every one of us, we all have our own issues. We all have our own baggages. But on an average level, he is doing a fantastic job for the people of Rwanda, which I personally appreciate. And I believe that if some leaders in Africa, if a few leaders in Africa could do the same for their people, just imagine where Africa would have been by now. But let's continue.
They want to bring development to the people, or they want to fight corruption. And oftentimes, most times we see that the people rejoice for a while until we now begin to see that, the people are dissatisfied and then begin to yearn for civilian rule. How are we sure that what has happened in Niger, what has happened in Burkina Faso, what has happened in Mali, that these developments will actually bring about development to the people of those countries?
So what is your solution, my dear daughter? Let's just let things be. We're going to keep trying. We will keep trying. What happens is if Niger does it alone, they're not going to succeed because it's too small a country. It's already fighting against monstrous forces. That is why this moment is calling for everybody to support Niger. We must come together as a continent. We must speak with one voice. If we do not speak with one voice, even those who tried, are you trying to say Kwame Nkrumah didn't try? He tried, but he was alone. He was not supported by many African countries. Had Africa come together, when at the African Union in Addis Ababa in 1963, when Kwame Nkrumah and the Casablanca group were saying Africa for the Africans and African Union now, had the Casablanca succeeded back in 1963, Africa would be sitting in a different position. So my message to the Africans is, any African country that tries to stand up against the West alone without the support of other African countries, they are not going to succeed. Make no mistake about that. We are a tiny little dot in the ocean. But when we come together as a continent, that's why Niger must be supported. Mali must be supported. They have taken a position that is right, a position that is good for the Africans, a position that simply says exploitation of the continent can no longer continue. My daughter, you tell me, are you okay with all our natural resources creating millions of jobs for European kids when our kids cannot get jobs because our natural resources are not getting value addition? Are you okay with that? Do you call that democracy?
Big question. I think that's a question that all Africans will have to answer, but it's certainly not all bad news. I mean, for the longest of times, you have, promoted very strongly the Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was signed in 2018. And quite a number of African countries have signed on to that. I think we saw the very first.
When you see someone talks with so much passion in them, you can begin to understand how seriously the problem is. This is really a difficult thing to process. And that's the thing when anyone hears about a thing like this, they are like, how is it even possible? Like, how can something like this be going on and no one is doing anything about it? How can Africa, with all her natural resources, be relegated as a poor continent? How can Africa, with almost everything that the world needs, everything, be as poor as it is? How can the people in Africa be this shallow-minded into thinking that they can do anything for themselves? How come? These are some of the fundamental questions that people are asking themselves. And I hope you ask yourself too. Maybe you might come up with a solution or with an answer. It's really, really hurtful. It's really, really painful. It's really, really discouraging. And it's a disappointment to us Africans. It's really disappointing. And yet still, when the people decided to take back their country, it became a coup. It became something that the West doesn't like. And even France has the heart, the big heart to say they won't leave. France has the infantry to threaten Niger and tell them that if their interest in the country is being threatened, they will attack Niger. And I'm like, this is not France, it's Niger. So how come your interest in someone's country can be much more important than the people of the country? How is that even possible, my brothers and sisters? How is that impossible? That you came into someone's house, and because the person allowed you to stay in their house, they thought you were a good friend, you were a good person, so they let you stay. And after a couple of years, the people said that we've realized that our friendship is not working. We've realized that you are taking so much from us and giving little to nothing back. So we don't want to be friends with you anymore. Please, can you just go? And you'll be like, no, I cannot leave because I have made your house my home, and so I cannot leave. And if you dare push me out, I will attack you in your own house. This is crazy, my brothers and sisters. This is really, really crazy. Things we never thought will happen are not happening. How can France be saying openly, be defying the military junta in Niger, openly defying them? This is crazy. So let's continue.
Trade happened in 2021, but it's been slowly being implemented. Are you frustrated somewhat with how slowly things are moving with AfTA?
Let me tell you the honest goodness truth when it comes to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. It's a wonderful idea. It's the one thing that the African leaders have been able to accomplish that was discussed during the creation of the OAU. Of course, we talk about one military, we talk about one currency, one customs union and all that. Of all the required pillars of Africa's development, the trade is one issue that the heads of states have been able to deliver. However, here is my biggest fear. As long as there's no free movement of people, it's going to be very difficult to implement the African Continental Free Trade Area. As long as we still have the exodus of African capacity we are going to have issues with implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. My biggest fear right now is that because of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we have now put a system in place where if we do not wake up to the reality, we are going to be handing Africa back to the colonizers, this time on a silver platter. Who has the funds to build the transcontinental highway? It's not us, Black people. Who has the funds and the capacity to bring about the development, to build the ports, to build the infrastructure that is required? It is not us. So who are the companies that are getting the contracts to implement the African Continental Free Trade Area? They're Chinese companies. They're Middle Eastern companies. They're European companies. They're Indian companies. It's everybody else except us. I have not seen a push to promote Africans coming together as a continent. I've not seen a push to line up the opportunities and say 60% of these must be occupied, must be run. These contracts must be given to Africans, must be given to Black people. I've not seen that document that's demanding that X amount must stay with the people. That is where I see the problem going to be. If we do not manage the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we are going to be handing Africa back to the colonizers, this time on a silver platter. That is my fear, and I hope it does not come to fruition. We need to make sure that we speak very strongly to it. We need a document that says, at a minimum, 60% of all the contracts must go to the Africans. And then we set out a plan to make sure that the Africans are educated and informed about the process of getting these contracts. We must also be very clear about how to mobilize the funding so Africa can be built by the Africans, for the Africans. We do not mind foreign direct investment. We do not mind our friends coming to help us, but Chinese do not look to outsiders to build China. Europeans do not look to outsiders to build Europe. No one else looks outside their region to build their regions. Why do we Africans, why must we always look outside? But also, the Secretary General for the African Continental Free Trade Area must go the extra mile to educate and inform the Africans, and also open doors for those opportunities for Africans to build the Africa that they want through the African Continental Free Trade Area. If that is not done, colonization 202 is around the corner.
So what would you then make of this summit, which is just concluded in South Africa, the BRICS summit, which is rounding up now? They say that their bank is going to be, that's the bank's international, the New Development Bank, which is the name of the bank owned by the BRICS nation, will now be lending out at least 30% of its.
I have always said that in order for Africa to really move ahead, we Africans must get involved. And the fact that our leaders sometimes do not regard us, the African people, as people who can actually do things for ourselves is kind of like so shameful. They rather bring in foreigners to do certain things in the continent rather than us, the Africans. And I have said this like a million times, that the Chinese are not in Africa to help Africans. They might have built a few roads, a few bridges here and there, but they are not really there to help Africa. The Russians are not there to help Africa. All of them are in Africa for what they can get from the continent. They are thinking only about what they will get out of the continent. They are not there because they love the African people. They are not there because they want us to succeed. No. The Chinese especially are not there to help us get anywhere. They are there because of what they can get from Africa. And you can see how much the Chinese are also mining out of Africa. They are making a lot of money from Africa. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing business and making profit. No, there's nothing wrong about that. If China wants to do business in Africa, good and fine. But we Africans must be educated enough to understand that the Chinese in Africa are not in Africa to help us. They are not our friends. No one should ever consider an outsider as a friend, especially the Chinese or the Europeans or the Americans. They are not our friends. They are in Africa for what they can get from the continent. And we all must be aware of that. And Dr. Arikana did a fantastic job when she was the AU ambassador in the US. She did an excellent job on that front. She mobilized the people. She educated the people. She put Africa first. And what was her reward for doing all that? The AU sacked her. So you can see how we, the Africans, sometimes can be our own problems. The AU sacked her for doing her job, for educating the people, for telling the people that France is of no good in Africa and the Chinese are no better. The AU sacked her. Yeah, that's what the AU did. And Africans, let's just continue.
Loans, giving it out in local currency. Do you think this is a good development?
I think it's a very good development, but again, it has to be managed. My understanding of that development bank is that the funds will be given to the country, and then their job is to follow behind and monitor the process and the manner in which the funds are being used. I think it's a good step in the right direction. I was actually able to meet with their one of the directors for that bank, very jacked up lady who understands Africa well. So I think if we do our part as Africans, that's actually a very good thing. But we must also do our part. The problem with us Africans is always implementation on the ground. So it's about education. It's about really coming up with a special focus and talking to the people. Let them get a buy-in from the people. Because once people have a buy-in, it's easier for them to move forward. But if the monies are just flooded into the country without the buy-in from the people, without really letting them know, not only from their own little community point of view, but they must look at it and say, what I'm doing is not only for my community, but it's for my country, it's for my SADC region, and it's for my continent. Let people feel proud of what is going on. Let them understand that what I'm doing right now is actually a fight against the Chinese. It's a fight against the Europeans. So when we go to the world stage, we can stand up together as Africans and say, look what we have done. Just to the extent that the Chinese are proud of having built the China that they built. We too must have that spirit. So that spirit must be cultivated from a village level, from the country level, from sub-regional level, and ultimately to the continental level. So as the funds are being pushed into Africa, are we educating our people? Are we making our people feel proud of what they're doing and the effects of what they're doing, how it percolates to a better Africa, which is what we want? So yes, the bank is a good thing. It's a good starting point, and we can actually use it to benefit our participation, and by our, I mean us Africans, our participation in the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Great outcome, but it must be nurtured.
Well, you've been doing a real yeoman's job in the diaspora. Do you ever hope to come back to Africa someday and maybe run for office? Just joking. I mean, I'm just asking. Has it ever in mind?
I am not going to run for any office. The only office I would consider running is the chairman of the African Union Commission. That's it. Because I do feel that there is a need for a voice there.
Like she said, right, in Africa, and I have also said it, our greatest problem is implementation. We come up with these wild ideas, very excellent, no doubt. We discuss about it. We bounce the idea back and forth. We organize seminars. We call the expert. They come in, they deliberate, they talk, they give the pros, they give the cons. And everything is being discussed. Every little corner of the idea is being touched. And every I dotted, every T crossed. And then the problem begins. Implementation. At that stage, everything just dies. It just dies, just like that. Everything just dies down. that has been a problem in Africa. And until we Africans begin to realize that is negatively affecting us, the Africans, we will not go anywhere. Because the idea of Africa Common Passport has been discussed for many years, but yet still, we haven't gone anywhere with that. What about a single currency for Africa? That too has been discussed at length, but yet still, nothing to show for it. What about the so-called West African single currency? Is it the ECO? ECO. Where is it? No way. I think the East Africa is not talking about theirs. We haven't seen anything. What about the Africa free movement, like they say, people, a borderless Africa? That too has been discussed. And nothing. And like she mentioned, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement that many countries signed, I think that one was the only thing that a huge number of African leaders accepted it. But yes, still, it hasn't really fully been implemented. Now, a few countries might have implemented it and they are trying to put it into practice. But the majority of Africa, the majority of the African countries, they have not fully implemented this idea. So you can see what we are talking about. Africa has fantastic ideas. Leaders come up with excellent ideas, and then they dance, and then they drop everything. That is exactly what is going on. And this idea has to change. It has to change. When you set something, do it. When you promise to do something, do it. Don't keep on procrastinating. Procrastination is a very, very terrible idea. So let's continue.
Right now, there is no voice. African Union is like a dead entity, and something needs to happen there. African Union is one entity that could speak on behalf of the continent, that could speak and call out those who are abusing Africa. It is the one place that we could actually let the world know that the exploitation and abuse of the African continent has got to come to an end. That voice is not there. That is the only place that I think I can make a difference. Besides that, no. I'm already in Africa, by the way. I spend half of my time in Africa now. I travel quite a bit, and I intend to continue to do so.
Well, may God bless and keep you in your travels. Thank you so much for coming on Hard Copy, Your Excellency, Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao.
Thank you for having me, my daughter. Keep up the good work. We are so proud of all the work that you guys are doing. We look forward to continued work as we build the Africa that we want, and as we also stand up on the tallest mountain and tell the world abuse and exploitation of Africa has got to come into an end. The revolution for Africa's liberation has arrived, and those who don't jump on the bandwagon, your days are numbered in Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a fantastic interview, and I really love Dr. Arikana Chihombori. She's a fantastic lady. She's done an excellent job in educating Africans. She's opened the eyes of a lot of people in Africa, myself included. And like she said, African Union is like a dead. I don't want to use that one. It's like how can I put it? A toothless bulldog. Yeah, it can only bark, but it cannot bite. Exactly. And until that changes, then we won't say anything, because the coup in Niger has been welcomed by many Africans, myself included, because we have realized that even though we do not appreciate coups, but what France was doing in that country was criminal. What France was doing in that country was evil. So the coup is by far the best thing that to come out of that country. And then the AU came out and said that, no, we do not support the coup in Niger. So by so doing, we have suspended Niger as a member of AU. You keep on suspending your members for doing things the Westerners do not like. Because ask yourself, and this is a question I've also asked myself, and I want you guys to also listen carefully. How does the coup in Niger affect ECOWAS? How does it? They are not invading ECOWAS. They don't have a border issue with ECOWAS members. So how does that coup affect ECOWAS? Until ECOWAS is threatening to invade Niger militarily. How does the coup in Niger affect the African Union? So much so that they have to suspend Niger's membership. How does it affect the AU? It affects the Westerners because they are stealing from the country. But how does it affect the AU? This is a question that I want you guys to ask yourself. And please, share your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. Because like always, I love hearing what you have to say. And I try my best to reply as much comment as I can. So, let us know what you think about this interview. Let us know what you think about the AU's approach to Niger. Let us know what you think about ECOWAS remarks or ECOWAS threat to Niger. And you will get a reply from me. So thank you very much for watching this video. And like always, see you in the next one.